Do I got sound now? It's my bad. I forgot to plug in the little microphone. It should be good now. Might be a little too good. All right. Now, what I was saying was I was talking about Florida gardening this time of year. Being midsummer, most things that grow that most people want to grow, like your market gardenings, your tomatoes, your cucumbers, your squash, lettuce, things along those lines, they're either done or really, really close to done. The heat and the humidity this time of year, it just kills them. If the heat doesn't get them, the humidity gets them. If the humidity doesn't get them, the funguses from the humidity gets them. If the funguses don't get them, the massive influx of bugs this time of year does. So it's pretty much a dead zone. There's some things you can grow. Some things, if you already had them planted, were fine. Will grow right through it. Eggplant, for instance, if you've already got your eggplant going, they'll be fine. Okra will grow through this. You can still plant southern peas. At They'll go right through it. They don't care. The only problem with planting southern peas this late is that we tend to have later in the fall a fly that will burrow into the young seed pods and lay their eggs in it. So you, generally speaking, with the black-eyed peas and other southern peas, you'll hit a certain point where all of a sudden you're not getting anything that's not infested. Now that can be controlled with neem, um, and planting various types of mints, Cuban oregano, which is in the mint family, and other things in its vicinity. Other things can be lemongrass will go right through it, and citronella, things that discourage those pests. However, generally speaking, most gardeners, starting right about now, are pulling in the last of their tomatoes, and they're most of the time they're not going to do anything for the next 6 to 8 weeks. If they have a good indoor spot or a protected outdoor spot, they might start seeds for this fall. I'll be doing that in a couple of weeks with tomatoes. However, I will not be planting much, if anything, for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Right now, what most gardeners in the South and particularly Florida need to do is concentrate on basically keeping the weeds down, mowing the massive overgrowth that occurs every year with the grass. Uh, these massively invasive grasses are horrible. They're not native to here, and it's part of the lawn culture, and it's basically taken over everything. Um, I do have some fun things that I'll be planting this fall. I'm hoping to kill off enough of that grass to be able to put out. I've got a giant bag of native seeds that are native flowers. And I mean, it's a big bag. I'm going to put a lot of that out. Hi, small town. Hi, Deb. Um, I've got creeping thyme. If I'm lucky, that creeping thyme will actually take, and then I won't have to deal with as much grass. Um, I've got a few other ideas. I want to get other ground covers in here other than the grass, especially in the backyard. The backyard is in a transition period right now where I've improved the soil to such a point that the grass now grows exponentially faster. I've got a whole bunch of evasives other than the normal evasive grasses that have moved in that are growing at extraordinary speed. Like we're talking a foot plus more a week. That's a bad thing and a good thing at the same time. That's one of them catch 22s. The bad thing is there's no way I'm going to be able to keep up with it by myself. The good thing is I'm going to be dumping large amounts of biomatter everywhere. The more I dump, the more fertile the soil gets. I now have worms just randomly anywhere in my yard. That's pretty good for a yard that started off as being pure quartz sand, like 99% quartz sand. It rains, I have worms that come up. And I have the soil in areas where I haven't even tried to improve has improved on its own simply because of the sheer amount of biomatter that I have dumped in all my beds and around all my trees. Yeah, I do let the chickens out to eat the wild grass. I'll be doing that more. They're still pretty small, and we have hawks here, among other predators, but really the hawks are the main issue for letting them just wander. I also got to do some repairs on the fence to keep them in. I need to fix my gate, and I need to fill a couple holes. But I want to let them kind of wander around during off season. I also want to build a small chicken tractor so I can move them along and let them completely strip an area and then throw new seed down. However, with the present heat, any building like that is temporarily suspended. However, I did get my hands on a very good deal for a shade cloth that I'm going to put across my back patio. This will allow me to move at least some of my operations that are on the north side of the property, on the front of the house, to the backyard where they're a little more secure. I've got some work to do there. In general, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some poles and concrete them into 5-gallon buckets and put some eye-rings at the top. And then on the house itself, there's already a couple J-hooks, but I want to add some more. I don't know what I did with them. There they are. So I've got these J-hooks. There used to be 5 in here. Now there's 3. And that's going to be attached to the house. That'll allow me to string that shade cloth across the back. And then I'll be able to move at least, I'd probably 70% of what I have out front, out back. See, that's south facing. South facing is very bad in Florida. Everything burns. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's too close to the house, it's going to burn from the reflection off the house. And the house is white. I ain't painting in any other color. It keeps my energy bills down. It gets hot enough as it is. But that'll be nice to have. I'll be able to do that before too long. I have everything I need to do it except a bucket of sand. Sand's not really a big issue since I live in Florida and everything is sand. So I need to mix some of the cement I have with sand. I don't want to waste cement. Stuff's got quite expensive. But I didn't buy regular bags of pre-made concrete. I can take 1 bag of cement and mix that as high as 5 bags worth of equal volume sand. not going to go quite that extreme. It's going to be more like a 5-gallon bucket of sand and a 5-gallon bucket of cement, and I'll mix it together, put it in the buckets with the poles, let it set, get, you know, 24 hours, let it set, and then I can move on. However, it's been raining literally every afternoon for like 2 weeks. So that has posed a little bit of a problem. Of course, my lighter doesn't want to work. All right, I guess I don't get to do that. Oh well, it's not like I need one anyway. However, right now we're just kind of in a transition phase in the backyard. I started to bring that up earlier. With all the fruit trees I have, yeah, Portland, small town. That's exactly what I got, but I'm mixing it with sand. I'll go a lot further with it. Um, with all the fruit trees, as they get larger, it's going to start shading out a lot of these grasses. With enough of that shade, it'll kind of transition the environment itself. It might take another year or two before I transition into that. Hi, Happy. But it's moving forward. As the soil improves, I'll be able to grow more varieties of things. I'll be able to do more vegetables. You know, it's significantly difficult to do market gardening or traditional vegetables in bad soil. And the soil has improved a lot, and you may have noticed that I've grown a lot more vegetables this year. And that's mostly because I've been just so much biomatter. Biochar, I make it all winter long, and I distribute it everywhere. Mulch, the mulch I get is Arbor's mulch. It's from the power company. They have a company here locally called Asplund, big orange truck. Now they've got a few white ones, and they have to pay to dump it at the local dump. So if you call them up and say, "Hey, I want so many loads," they'll drop it off for free. I use it everywhere. Um, One of the bad side effects of using large amounts of mulch like that is it just completely sucks the nitrogen out of the system. This is good and this is bad. You know, I'm adding huge amounts of organic matter, but then things like tomatoes, strawberries, cucumbers, they get stunted because there's no nitrogen. A lot of people want to get their commercial fertilizers and go in and throw the commercial fertilizers everywhere. The commercial fertilizers will burn up all that organic matter in no time flat, and you'll get nowhere here. Yeah. When the rains, which I have now, come in, it all that will just be gone. The microbial life will kick off, eat all the nitrogen, eat all the carbon. You'll have nothing left but the sand you started with. So one of the ways that I deal with that is I bury fish underneath what I'm planning on growing. The mulch is on top. So the mulch is composting down at the top, not stealing all the nitrogen because there's a ton of fish underneath it. So that's how me going fishing ties into all of this. I go fishing on a regular basis. At any given time, I have lots and lots of fish in the freezer. Catfish, mullet, fish skins, fish guts, me cleaning them. If we don't eat the fish, something happens, it goes in the garden. All the guts and the heads goes in the garden. I also make a liquid fertilizer out of fish. I've got two different JDAM versions that I'm making. One is a long JDAM version where you basically throw some fish, some local compost in a bucket, seal it up, add water, and set it to the side for like a year. Stuff is very, very good. It's also extremely stinky. Another what I'm doing is kind of like a quick JDAM, and it's just taking a happy. I've got the Florida gray sands. It's kind of like sugar sand, but it's got a little bit of a gray color. Now, in some parts of the yard, I have red sands. The red sands are not native to most parts of Florida. You'll find the redlands down by Miami, and there's some up in the Panhandle, and there's some just west of Orlando. When this house was built, they were trucking in sands from Georgia and southern Alabama. So 3 feet down, I had the construction sand, which is a red sand. And above that, I have what they were calling topsoil, which is just the gray Florida sand. I also have some clumps of clay. If I dig in certain spots, every once in a while I'll turn up a big chunk of gray clay. That's because I'm on a canal, and when the Army Corps of Engineers came through here and dug out the canals, they hit the hard pan that's about 15 to 20 feet down and just pile it up on the lots that come up against the canal. So across the back of the property, I have some clay, but it's pretty far down. I add so much organic matter, and seriously, it took 3 years to be able to grow weeds here. The former owner sprayed this property so continuously with Roundup and put down time release granules, trying to get the grass to grow. He was spraying weekly, sometimes twice a week. The front yard, it had grass. It looked okay. The backyard was it was a sand lot. Yeah, the biochar is the savior of this property during the winter months, period. When we move through our dry season here, we sometimes don't get rain for 3 months. And that biochar holds the moisture longer. Now, it's not foolproof. The overall environment will eventually strip this lot of any moisture during the dry season, but it extends it a great deal. And then when we do get rain, it sucks it all up and holds it. It makes a tremendous difference. I probably put at this point maybe 400 5-gallon buckets worth of biochar throughout this property. Every time I dig a hole, I throw biochar in it. Every time, like during the winter, we have a armadillo that comes through the yard and he digs holes all over the place. We just fish charcoal straight out of the fire pit, stick them in those holes. Yeah, the rain will wash out a lot of the nutrients here. I have come up with a couple tricks for that. They're collective. For instance, I'm putting down the half composted Arbor's mulch, but I'm teaming that by adding in just a little bit of clay. This makes a big difference. That clay will grab a hold of the sand, and it will grab a hold of the organic matter, and it will clump it all together, and it makes it more difficult for the rain to just rinse it out. Um, it's not 100%. Eventually, the rains in the summer will win, but not necessarily this summer. So if I'm doing it this year, it might be sometime 2 or 3 years down the road that it manages to rinse out what I put in now. So if I stop the regiment, within 5 years it'll be sand again. That's just how it is. But adding that small amount of clay, it's bitumen clay that I'm adding, and I'm getting it from a rather unusual source. There's really nowhere I can go here and just buy a bag of clay. But old school kitty litter is mostly bitumen clay. Now, something the ranchers and the cattlemen around here have done for over a century is when they dig a pond, they then line the bottom of the pond with bitumen clay. That holds the water in the pond. Otherwise, during the dry season, the pond's useless. It just becomes a hole. I'm basically kind of doing the same concept. Just slow, and it slows the water filtration down with the biochar and just the massive amounts of compost and mulch. And George, I know you use a lot of mulch. I'm using about the equivalent amount, but you can't tell because the grass just goes right over it, like instantly. But the grass is also somewhat a friend. Not so much with the massive growth during the summer, but at the same time, it's kind of catch 22. These grasses hold a lot of nitrogen. So when I go through in the fall and I massively chop down all this, I pull out my bush hog and I just go nuts and I drop all that grass that's 2-3 feet tall. It'll put down a mat that's 6-8 inches of high nitrogen grass clippings that dries out, turns into straw. It covers everything. I'll rake some of it out of the areas that I don't want it in for other things, but it it actually really increased the worm activity on the property over the last couple of years doing that, where I lost control of the overgrowth. A short period of time last year and the year before where I'd gotten sick, and then last year all of my lawn equipment, every bit of it, would not work. Nothing would work. 2 lawnmowers, 2 weed eaters, nothing. I could get nothing to work. I've got 50% up and going at this point. 1 lawnmower and the bush hog. Uh, the little weed eater I have somewhat works, but it's got a problem. It needs a spring. The sheer amount of activity I have had in improving the soil on this property is more than I could have actually have hoped for. My last house, the former owners had actually trucked in like 15 or 20 loads of the blackest dirt they could get and spread it everywhere. Uh, they didn't really garden. They did that for the grass because they couldn't keep the grass alive on that lot. It was significantly wetter than this one, right on a pond, and that pond would. Bye, Ronnie. Thanks for coming. Would flood periodically. So I could grow most anything over there as long as I took into account that how wet everything was going to be. So building up in certain spots. One of the big problems I had there was actually the neighbor's kid coming over the fence and smashing my gardens. Uh, Happened every year for 5 years. Every year. As soon as I planted something, he was over that fence. Um, the property I had before that was on a floodplain that was almost never flooded anymore because it had gotten cut off from the floodplain by a raised highway. You could grow almost anything you wanted there as long as you took into effect the complete lack of shade. That property had no shade. And I planted trees for that. And I had some pretty nice gardens there. Mostly decorative. I mixed in a lot of the edibles in with the decorative because at that time you weren't allowed to have food production in that neighborhood. So I had pineapples and all kinds of stuff in there, and they just didn't notice. But the first year I was there, I planted a row garden, and within a few weeks, I had problems with code enforcement, and I had problems with the management for the neighborhood. Take the exact same plants, including corn, plant it in a decorative format, and then drive right on by because some idiots didn't recognize it. Go figure, right? But I predict over the next year to 3 years, the rest of my fruit trees that I have on the property going into full production. Most of them are producing at this point. Shading out large amounts of the property, which I can't wait for because then I can increase ginger and turmeric and other things that I can grow. And the centerpiece in the backyard is a mulberry that will go dormant and allow light in during the winter, which means I can do my tomatoes and cucumbers and my market gardening in the winter here. And then it'll put on leaves and shade that area and extend the season just a little bit so that I can get in that harvest because that's something that is a definite problem here is we'll go from, oh yeah, everything's growing real well to it's 98 degrees and all your plants just burned. And it can be as different as one day it's 75 and the next day it's 98. Sometimes it'll go back down to 75. But some years it doesn't. Some years it just jumps into the 90s and stays there until November. Hate those years. Excuse me, I need to grab me a drink. Be right back. Sorry about that. My sinuses decided they wanted to drain. Hate it when that happens. Well, right now, I'm harvesting the last of my tomatoes. I won't get any more tomatoes until sometime this fall, late fall. I'm harvesting figs. Is that any better? Hopefully that's better. Uh, I am harvesting figs. I've got bananas that are, bananas take 6 months, so sometime this fall. Hopefully, I'll get more than one thing of bananas this year. Uh, we'll see. Thing just does not want to burn for me. Oh well. My cucumbers, I didn't get a single cucumber this year. It bloomed real heavy and then immediately died. Not really sure what was up. I was trying a high heat variety that I've done before, hoping to extend everything. And I planted in an area where it would get more shade later in the day, get morning sun, afternoon shade, and it was just covered in flowers. And the flowers would just fall off. I have my own bees, so they should have been being pollinated. I really needed to be able to get out there in the early morning and see whether or not the bees had any interest, but I never got a chance to. I'm hoping to be able to do some lettuce this year. I'm not a big fan of lettuce, but everybody else seems to be. And I've got probably 15 varieties of lettuce seed. People keep giving me lettuce seeds. I generally don't grow lettuce, but maybe I should. And the soil seems to be good enough this year to support it. So, uh, my key lime didn't really produce very heavy this year. A lot of different citruses will produce real good one year and hardly anything the next. It actually seems like all my citrus are lining up doing that together. My key lime only had, maybe 5 limes on it that I know of because they're little and they can blend in real well. I'm going to get okay amounts of Ponderosa lemon. If you're not familiar with Ponderosa lemon, it is a lemon that produces lemons this big, sometimes larger. It smells, the tree itself, just brushing against it, smells fantastic. Uh, I'm not going to get as many of those this year as I did last year, but next year I'll probably get 4 times the amount of what I'm going to end up with this year. It's just how they work. My Satsuma's only got like 6 or 7 on it. Next year we'll probably have 40. I'm on my 3rd year on another citrus that I started from seed, so it might bloom next year or the following year. And that is a wild citrus variety found here in Florida. So hopefully it'll do well. It's a small tangerine. They're extremely seedy. They're a little bit more sour than what people would want or what you'd get in a store, but it's about the same size as those little halos, but with a whole bunch of seed in it. That seed is what has allowed it to go wild here in Florida. I have a tropical almond I planted last year. Now, if you're not familiar with that, that produces a small fruit about the size of a small peach. Not that big. The fruit itself tastes a lot like peach or mango, but it has big seed in it, and that's what it's actually grown for in South America is the seed, because the seeds taste like almonds. Hopefully, it'll do good. My peach tree might not make it. Hopefully, I'm wrong on this, but 2 years ago, it got knocked down by a hurricane. Stood it back up. It's still alive. Last year, it didn't produce anything, and this year, it produced maybe a dozen peaches. However, it has a lot of dead on it. Like a lot of dead. So I'm going to have to trim all that off and hope for the best. And it's that time of year. I should be doing that now. It's midsummer. So I'll be doing that within the next couple of days. But we'll see how it goes. Now, in general, this time of year here in Florida, we're winding down. This part is kind of like our winter. We're doing prep if we can, but not much is going to be going on. About 6 to 8 weeks, when everybody else is winding down, we kick off. And that's exactly where we're moving into, is that dead zone. I'm going to put out as much mulch as I can. I'm probably going to be doing that at night because it's too hot during the day. Trying to keep the weeds at least reasonable, and trying to keep the grass at least, somewhat reasonable. But that's just kind of how it is this time of year. A lot of people don't realize that, and right now I'm on a whole bunch of garden forums, Facebook and various other online, Garden Web, if you're not familiar with that. This time of year, the Florida forums just fill up with people with little pictures of their dead tomatoes, and they're freaking out. What's wrong with their tomato? The one that they went and bought at Walmart for, $14 6 weeks ago. It had some tomatoes on it. They rotted, and the whole plant died, and they don't understand why. Well, that's because tomatoes, believe it or not, don't like this type of heat. They don't like the humidity. If the funguses don't get it, the sun does. If the sun doesn't, the bugs do. So that's just kind of how it is. Until people actually look up what their planting schedule is for here, and a lot of people never adjust to that. They come in from New Jersey or Ohio or, usually somewhere in the Northeast, and they want to plant the same time that grandma planted in New Jersey, and it just doesn't work here, and they come up with the yeah, right, Happy? Challenges. You just had a freeze. That is completely unheard of this time of year here. It'll never happen. They just come up to the conclusion that you can't grow anything here, and they plant a bunch of tropicals, and that's the extent of their gardening. And then come winter, and we do get freezes here, not every year, but some years bad, some years not so much. Comes through, wipes out all their tropicals, and they're real confused. Why'd all their tropicals die? Because we're not in the tropics. Happy I have seen snow in this part of Florida 5 times in my life. Never amounting to much. However, there have been a few freezes where it has been cold enough that when you turn on the water to try to keep things warm, you end up with beautiful ice sculptures. One year I actually froze my entire front yard here at this house because I turned on a sprinkler and went in bed and got up next morning and it was nothing but ice. And people from all over the neighborhood stopping by to look at the ice. It didn't kill the grass, stuff just came right back, but one can always hope. So, I'm probably going to wrap this up soon. I wanted to get in alive. Small town, one of the problems I have isn't that it never gets ripe per se. It's that fruit flies or other things get to it first. Take, for instance, my papayas. I almost always pick my papayas green and treat them more like a potato than waiting for them to be ripe. So if I try to wait for it to be ripe, I will not get one. We have a small wasp, I mean a little tiny funny looking wasp here that is a parasitic wasp that lays its eggs in the fruit. You'll cut that fruit open and it'll be full of maggots. So that goes to the chickens now. Anytime I run across one of those, you'll cut open a green one every once in a while, and that happens. Hi, Higgs. Fruit flies can be really bad on the peaches. Most years, they're not that bad for me. And I found there's an association with the peaches and guavas. Guavas have very thin skin and they grow very well here. And if you have a guava, those fruit flies come in. Like the little fruit flies I got flying around me right now. It's because I have small animals, and this time of year they get in the house. They'll die out in a couple of days. Not really much you can do about it. You can put out traps and whatnot, but they die out on their own. In this case, it's actually my fault. I brought in a big papaya, I sat it down, and the fruit flies found it. And I fed the papaya to the chickens this morning, so the fruit flies will be gone in a day or two. Just kind of how Florida is. As far as from the fruit trees, a lot of times if they're losing their fruit before they're ripe, it's either because the tree itself is not ready to be able to hold it, or the tree itself needs something. So, for instance, you can get the equivalent of blossom end rot on a lot of different fruits. And that could be too much fertilizer, not enough fertilizer, too much water, not enough water, not enough available calcium being the number one problem, or salt. A lot of people don't know about the salt thing. That actually comes down to the fertilizers that you're using. These industrial fertilizers, these big bags, time-release fertilizers, and Miracle-Gro and all that stuff, are salt. They are water-based salt fertilizers. And if the salt levels get too high in your soil, it will actually cause the plant to not be able to absorb the calcium. So that can be a problem. Uh, a good way to do that if you need a quick fix is Tums antacids. Just crush them up, add them to a gallon of water, shake it up, pour a couple gallons around it, around that tree, or maybe your squash is doing it, or your tomatoes. Everybody's always complaining about the blossom end rot on the squash, tomatoes, cucumbers. 9 times out of 10, it's actually their fertilizer or inconsistent watering that is making the calcium that's in the soil unavailable. See, the salts, when they get to a certain point, they kill the microorganisms, particularly the fungus, that will trade that plant the calcium that it needs. So it's kind of catch 22. It's why I use no artificial fertilizers here at all anymore. I did when I first started up on this system. I had to use some just to get the system going, but I don't need it anymore. Now, I still have maybe 5 pounds of 10-10-10 somewhere out there in the shed. People keep giving me bags of fertilizer. They're like, here, you're a gardener, have a bag of fertilizer. I really have a use for it. But you can't tell them that. So you take it. And 9 times out of 10, I end up giving it to other clients of mine who like using it with a bit of a warning as to what it does long term to their soil. So it's always a catch-22. Today, I harvested a bunch of figs. I'm real happy about that because I almost lost that fig tree 3 times. And last year, I buried 10 pounds of fish next to it. And this year, I buried 6 pounds of fish, and it's doing good again. And probably about 4 wheelbarrows of half composted mulch has gone around it, and the soil's better. But it had some problems, most of them man-made. But it's doing good now, and hopefully that tree will finally go somewhere. I want to go ahead and cut it here. Thank you very much for coming. I'm trying very hard to try to do this once a week. The reason I'm able to do it today is the kids aren't home, so I'm taking advantage of that situation. I'm also going to be doing more fishing live streams, but as long as it continues to be a constant thunderstorm every afternoon, it's going to have to wait until that stops doing that. So, or, the pattern changes to where it rains earlier in the day that I can get out, because that also happens. Thank you very much. You have a blessed day.